Okay, hello. Welcome to the latest edition of Getting There, eSchool news conversations with school tech directors on how they're responding to the pandemic. My name is Kevin Hogan. I'm editor at large for eSchool News, and I'm happy you're here, and especially happy that I was able to get Joe Cuso, who is the director of technology for the Quakertown Community School District, right across the river from me in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, to join us for this episode. Joe, welcome and thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin. I appreciate it.
I guess my first question to most folks in your position is, what are you doing today? It's probably a nice leisurely summer afternoon, right? Doing a little fishing.
Yeah.
What's happening right now?
I wish that was the case.
Yeah. What is
right
happening?
So right now, actually to the day, I've been in meetings since 8 o'clock this morning with, our cabinet team and our administrative team. And we have I have a meeting right after this, and then we have a board meeting tonight at 7. So the biggest thing on our plate right now, we did push the opening of our school back 2 weeks. We have a construction going on, so this ensures our construction will be done in time. So that was part of it. And then also just to give us a little extra leeway to prepare. But one of the big things on our, on our board agenda for this evening, it's been, a hot topic for the past few meetings we've had, is the whole in-person instruction and the spacing. How many can we fit in a classroom, right? That varies by the classroom. And then what do we do with the overflow, and scheduling and what that all looks like. So that's a big topic for tonight is, we did all our data collection, and what we found is in elementary, based on the responses we got from our surveys, that it's probably about 60-40, 60 wanted to come in person, 100%, 5 days a week. The others said virtual, and somewhere in the middle there was hybrid. In elementary, it looks like we can pretty much make that happen with 6-foot spacing in most cases. In secondary, when we look at that, spaces are tighter. And that we can do probably with about 4.5-foot spacing in some cases and 6 foot in others. So that's kind of the point of contention right now, is that spacing and what we can do to ensure that we can still get kids in school who need it the most. So, that's been the topic for, forever right now. So
that sounds like you're going to be in some sort of hybrid setup or a cohort setup, where some kids are coming in some days and other kids are remote.
Yeah, so we put out surveys. We provide, part of our returning student registration, we provided all students 3 options. So it's either, and tiered, so they selected number 1, number 2, number 3. So it's either you wanted to be in class 100% 5 days a week, hybrid, an AB, 2 days in, 1 day full virtual, and then the other cohort would come in for the last 2 days. And then finally, 100% virtual. So that's what we're playing with right now, because we look at the people who first choice was 5 days a week. So those are, people in the seats every day. And we take 50% of the AB kids and add those, and then try to look at the, the classroom spacing and see how that works. And then also utilizing overflow areas for those areas where we can't fit everybody in the class. We can have large spaces where they can still be in school, but participate remotely from the building, whether it's the gym, common space, or, large group instruction area.
How does that affect your IT infrastructure? Were you 1-to-1 before?
Yeah, we were, Kevin. So, we were 6 through 12 was a take-home 1-to-1 model. We've been 1-to-1 since, I don't know, it's been 12 years, if not more. Elementary, we had 1-to-1 devices, but on a cart-based allocation in the classroom. So I believe it was Friday the 13th, oddly enough, that was the date. That was the date that secondary, we were good. Elementary, all the principals at that last day assigned a device to every elementary kid to take home. So we had enough devices and extras. So we've been maintaining that over the summer. And now currently we started this week, typically 6th grade and 9th grade students, we provide a new device to them, and that's what they keep. So 6th grade keeps it to 8, they get a new one in 9, and then 9 keeps it through 12, and then keeps it as they graduate. So this week we were collecting current 9th grade devices and giving them a new one, so we could free up their current device to push down grade levels. So that's what we're doing this week. And then next week it's 2nd grade devices to collect those iPads to push down to kindergarten, and just, moving that around. But as far as internal infrastructure, we have a strong infrastructure. We have a big bandwidth pipe. So as far as devices in schools, there's no additional. In fact, it'll be less impactful than 100% of kids being there.
That's interesting. How about in terms of so it sounds like you had a big pipe, so you really didn't have to do any reinforcement when it comes to bandwidth in the schools. How about the access to internet from home, did you have any issues with students not having access?
Yeah, so we looked at that. I mean, we look at that all the time. But obviously, when we shut down, it was more of a need. We cut off our marking period in March. That was the end of the school year, so students couldn't go down in grade. They could only go up with learning opportunities we provided. But we did look at students who we knew or principals identified or guidance counselors identified as probably in need. So we were able to acquire hotspots and then provide those to those students as best we could.
Okay.
One thing we found out that was interesting though is so a lot of our English language learners, we have a great group of teachers that works directly with those students. We had a really high, probably 100% of those students, because their parents and families had relationships with those teachers. Those teachers are the ones who reached out and said, "Hey, if you need help, we have these devices. We can get them to you." Those weren't a problem. It was the other students who, either my team or we tried to have building principals reach out. Some of those people were unresponsive to our inquiries, whether it was phone calls or for whatever reason. So
Yeah.
we did our best. Everybody who we reached out to that said they needed a device, we provided it, and access as well. We'll continue that moving forward. So
Now, I saw on your social media feed some big boxes coming in
yep.
to the elementary. You can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was actually so our old, we had two buildings, Milford Middle School and Tecan Valley Elementary, which over the past 2 years, we had sold both buildings to a local private school. And we are currently occupying Tecan Valley Elementary while Neidig Elementary was under construction. We were putting a new addition on that and renovating the school. So that's still going on. So we'll vacate Tecan Valley Elementary and move into Neidig once it's complete. And we're hoping we can do that by middle of September when we start. So the post I said we outfitted, we will be outfitting that whole building with clear touch interactive panels for those buildings. So that's what those were. And we also got some of their, really great to see the little ones interact with them. Convertible panel where the panel actually folds down into a table and drops down to little guy sizes. And
Oh,
they can,
cool.
4 of them can interact, in different quadrants by themselves. So it's really cool to see. So I wish opening of that school was under a different circumstance,
Yeah.
but we're grateful to have it because it's a larger capacity. So it gives us some more flex space as we need it.
Talk a little bit about because you had had a one-to-one and had the ability to have a remote setup for so long. Talk a little bit about some of the security issues that maybe a district who's now gone into a remote situation might have to deal with that they hadn't thought about before. Anything particular?
So I mean, from a teacher perspective, all our teachers have had their own laptops for the past 22 years. So we've already had that work from home ability for longer than I've been there. So we do have security measures on those laptops, both intrusion detection and malware and that kind of thing. And then for student devices, being that we're all Chromebooks now, security on those I'm not super concerned with that. I mean, there's really been no exploits on those, other than minor, very minor things. But and then with the addition of like web filtering now that's done in the cloud, we're not tunneling in that traffic back to the district, but yet we can still monitor where they're going at all times. So from a security perspective, I know if you're doing like Windows laptops, if that's where you're sending kids home, I'd be a little more concerned and balancing that, locking them down to some flexibility where you can still support them. You lock them down too much and now you have this remote support that you have to provide, and that can create some issues there. But since we're all Chromebooks, except for teachers, we haven't had any struggle with that.
Okay. Well, and even having such a long history of having a one-to-one and teachers having their things at home, I'll assume that the Zoom rooms were something new. Talk a little bit about that adaptation of that technology and how it affected your schools.
Sure. So the online learning piece by itself, we've done for a while in varying capacity. About 12 years ago, we had started our own online cyber school. It was all our own teachers, all our own students, all our own curriculum. And we eventually stopped doing that. We still offered it in some capacity, but not full blown like we used to. So the infrastructure as far as remote learning, as far as LMS goes, we've had a full blown LMS with curriculum for probably the past 12 or so years. So teachers were familiar with that. Now, when it comes to the students suddenly aren't in your class all the time, it was I won't say the Wild West, but everybody was adapting to what that looked like. And, like you saw at the first, all the Zoom bombing that was going on,
Yeah.
and whatnot. And then, Google's been a great asset for many districts, right? Google Meet's been invaluable to our teachers. But yeah, so that, I mean, to me, teachers adapted well, and then it's getting students comfortable with it. But moving into this next year, providing synchronous opportunities for students, that's that'll be the new part, right?
Yeah.
But as far as the content being delivered through a learning management system, that's not new, and remote instruction is not new. But it's bridging that gap of in-person and virtual. That's gonna be the, I won't say difficult, but the struggle if there is one.
Yeah. It's like
Especially at the younger ages.
yeah, well, yeah. So it's a grand experiment, really, right?
Yeah.
It's a giant
Yeah.
beta test.
And the interesting part, I mean, everybody's going, but the equity about that too, right? So people have devices, they have access, right? But you also now have parents who are going to work, right?
Right.
We have some of our population where a sixth grader might be the head of the household during the day.
Wow.
So you have a sixth grade, a third grade, and a kindergartner all expecting to do online learning they're also worried about feeding themselves, and
Right.
where mom and dad may not be, financially okay to not go to work like many of us. So that's probably the biggest concern I have, is ensuring that all that education continues to happen, and we can, whether it's home supports or, building those relationships with the community and our school district, just to form those relationships and ensure students are getting the education they need, whether it's in-person, hybrid, or virtual.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. A couple of districts I've spoken to have talked about how they basically their IT departments became customer service, really, or just kind of answering the needs of parents who maybe not even had technology issues, but some social emotional issues. Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, I mean, now again, our students had devices for a long time. And because our learning was optional over, March to June, we saw varying rates of participation. It was high for what it was. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. But yeah, there was some concern about screen time and, having to have a student sit in front of a computer for hours on end. And then also the emotional impact of parents, right? Becoming teachers. You can be the best teacher virtually, as anybody, but without being able to physically stand next to that student and help them and even console them when they're struggling, that's all going to come down to a lot of the families.
Yeah.
I mean, our teachers will do a great job and support our students, but that family dynamic is definitely going to play a role in both the child's well-being and the parents. I mean, parents are going to need to learn calculus, right? Parents are
Yeah.
going to need to know algebra, and just the pedagogy behind learning is new. But I also think it's going to be a good opportunity for parents who may not be familiar with technology. They're going to be.
Yep.
Kids
Yeah.
are going to teach their parents and move on. So I was on a panel this morning, and one of the things we brought up was so many districts who were fighting for years to get to the point we are now, right? Pushing for one-to-one, pushing for online learning. Good or bad, a lot of those districts got there now. So they're figuring it out, but they got there.
Yeah.
So I think when this is all said and done and we come back to some form of normal, districts across the country are going to be in a totally different place than they were a year ago. And learning, I think, is going to look a lot different than it did a year ago. And one thing we spoke about was, look at a typical class period, right? We have normal schedules. Does every student need 45 minutes for a particular lesson, right? We always did that to meet the needs of all students, but with online, we should be able to personalize learning a bit more and work with those students and figure out where they are and try to move them along. So time may actually be on our side in some cases. We might find students accelerate quicker in this environment,
Yeah.
which may lead time for students who are more in need to get more attention. I mean, it's all new. We're all going to figure it out. So we'll see.
I like your glass half full there. So as a seasoned district to this, were there still some surprises for you, and were there still some maybe some innovations where you're like, like we could have done this all along?
Well, I mean, we certainly could have been doing this all along. I mean, besides the scheduling and obviously the social distancing constraints, those are two hurdles that are huge.
Yeah.
But I will say the one big surprise, I mean, we didn't really have any hiccups. I mean, we were pretty smooth rolling everything out. And every Friday from March until the end of the contractual year, every Friday was a PD day for teachers. And PD in our districts has always been up and down, but we had in many of those 100% participation by our teaching staff. So they had the desire to make this work, right?
Yeah.
And the only thing I'd say is a big struggle, and I mean, you're in Jersey, so, you know, I can't speak for the rest of the country, but I know for our region, you know, the constant moving of the goalpost,
Yeah.
you know, from March until it's still happening.
Yeah.
All right, this is what you got to do. No, next week you can't do that. You got to do this. Now we're loosening this up. So we keep moving this goalpost around. We keep changing information, and we're getting to the point now where, you know, 4 weeks away from opening our doors. Many have already opened, and how many more times is that going to move?
Right. Right.
You know, so
But yeah, but it seems like you have a plan in place though that can pivot to those different changing
Yep.
things, right?
Yeah, in our planning, we've always wanted to be fluid in everything we do.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's one of the things we're looking at is, you know, not necessarily having one teacher all virtual and one teacher all in person. We want one teacher to do both, because this way, if a teacher has to go out, a student isn't meeting a new teacher, they can still continue that education with fluidity, with the same type of instruction. They still know their teacher. They have that relationship. Will it work 100%? Probably not, but we're trying to keep as many norms as we can
Yeah.
for our students. But yeah, overall, it's been interesting. You know, the fear I think we all have when we open those doors. I know you saw it down in, I think it was Georgia, those photos that came out and students got suspended and all that. You know, every district is, what are hallways going to look like?
Yeah.
You know, and kids are going to be kids. So it's interesting to say the least. So
Any thought about the other technologies beyond the Chromebook at home? I mean, have you given guidance to parents in terms of creating learning spaces, and are there other pieces of technology that you're considering giving to students that they can use at home?
So we do have many parent resources available on our website. We've had those for a while, whether it's along, you know, data privacy concerns or how to log in via Clever or what different applications provide. Our Office for Teaching and Learning created amazing resources for parents and students for those learning opportunities. If parents were really engaged and they wanted to keep providing their kids those opportunities, they laid out tons of resources, how to use them. As far as additional tools for students, no, I mean, we drop some assessment tools because we just don't feel they're going to be needed in this environment right now to the same capacity, and we switch some things around to do them in another way. As far as teachers go, fortunately enough, so all our technology is on a 4-year cycle,
Okay.
and we have four stacked financial leases. So every year we replace some large piece of equipment, and so happened, you know, great for us, this is teacher refresh year.
Ah.
So I have a warehouse of, you know, 500 brand new HP X360 Elite books for them, which is going to prove invaluable because they're a full-blown digitizer. So when they fold those over, they have a full digitized tablet, and now they
Nice.
have a personal whiteboard. I also purchased web cameras. One teachers had some concern is they wanted to keep both laptops, their new one plus the one they currently have. And although that's a solution we may use in some cases, we looked for webcams. I was able to find a partner who's provided them for me. So those actually shipped today. We'll get those with 25, 30-foot USB cables with telescoping tripods. So if they're doing instruction in the room, they can set that far away,
Yeah.
set that up to the front of the room, and they can still utilize their laptop for instruction. And those also have multi-directional microphones in them. So their voice will pick up through that same web camera. And, you know, fingers crossed, that's going to provide us what we need for that synchronous instruction and also some of that asynchronous video, you know, that created video that we'll be posting for students as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys are tricked out.
Well, you know, you're trying to stay ahead. I mean, if you knew, I mean, for instance, luckily we weren't dependent on Chromebooks, but, you know, I do still have an order of about 12 or 1,300 Chromebooks, one for an incoming 6th grader who would get new ones,
Okay.
and also additional ones to pepper in there for some of the older units. Originally we heard September, now I'm here in November. Luckily we don't need them. Every student has a device, but those were things that we were expecting to get in. So I was happy to see at least the webcam piece I was able to get in.
Right.
So
talk a little bit about, and I guess especially in the elementary schools, it's the first time that they were going home with devices.
mhm.
Did you have to look at your acceptable use policies and make any sort of changes there, or make in terms of web filtering? I've spoken to some districts who you know, kind of lifted the garage door on YouTube, where YouTube used to be something that they weren't allowed to use, and now it was up and open. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, we send them home. They're being filtered at home the same way they would be in school. I mean, I've been with Quakertown almost 20 years now, and one early on. I mean, I don't know when it was, 15 years ago or so. When the whole YouTube thing really started catching on with education, and at first we were on the bandwagon of let's just block it, but then what we realized is there's just too much content on there that's valuable.
Yeah.
So we allow it.
Okay.
We have some restrictions on if the content's rated a certain way, certain kids can't see it. But we've been very open in Quakertown for years. We found, me personally, I find the less restrictive I am, obviously we're not going to put out any pornography or anything like that, but we find kids less likely to do devious things, right? They're always trying to get around what you want.
Yeah.
And to me, YouTube, there's a lot of good on there. I mean, kids are going to watch music videos and whatnot. But they're going to do that on their phone either way. I mean, that's kind of the change. Every kid has a device, if not two, in their pocket.
Right.
So, and when a device goes home with a student, if they're going to do something they shouldn't, chances are they're not going to do it on our device.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so
they have an unfiltered device in their pocket, or so.
Yeah, they're going to keep that. They know the difference.
Yep, absolutely. And we've seen a definite downtick in internet related incidents, and that's just because they have their own device. They'll ride their 4G or 5G connection and do whatever they need to do. They don't need us anymore for internet,
Right. Any interesting behavior changes with the students in terms of creativity or in terms of in the curriculum? Again, you talked about that period after March not being graded but being like a learning opportunity. Any examples of some really positive ones?
I mean, in elementary, we had a lot of good family participation. Our platform there, we were Canvas K-12. This current year, we eliminated Canvas K-5. We just didn't believe it was a platform for elementary. Teachers and students love the Seesaw platform. We saw teachers doing their morning check-ins with students. And I was lucky to pop into some of those and see the students' faces and how excited they were.
Yeah.
Although they're excited to come into a class, they're just as excited to see their friends virtually from their home.
Yeah.
Doing some virtual show and tells, or a lot of cool art assignments took place through Seesaw with our art instructors giving direction and seeing what comes out. And I've actually seen a lot of that on social media, not from Quakertown, but how engaged kids can actually be on their own. Give them somebody in front of them. And the one thing, and I spoke about this earlier today, when they talk about video and online instruction, it was like 2.5 minutes or something like that. It was that size of a chunk. Seemed to be like that. There was some study that was like, that was the attention that in order to get the most impact, keep it in small chunks. And I'm seeing that online in different aspects when they're doing these different projects. They're micro chunking it or whatever you want to say, but small chunks that students will rather be overwhelmed than with an hour. They'll get a bite of it, do that, and they can click onto the next piece and pace themselves rather than this overwhelming trying to keep up or things like that. But I personally just think it's amazing to see this all happen and kids being engaged. Our participation, even in an optional learning environment, was way more than we anticipated. I mean, we saw it peter out a little bit, towards June, May, but that's expected, right? I mean, it was, but the participation has been super high, and the response we got from families has all been supportive. Obviously, families want their kids back in school for the most part, but they understand, we got to follow regulations. But it's really exciting to see all those things that we've always wanted, whether you're blended classroom, flipped classroom, whatever you want to call it, that we've always been pushing for. Yeah. And now it's like, now we have to do it. Yeah. And it's awesome to see our teachers can do it. And in many cases, I found that our teachers have been doing it. I found a lot of teachers are doing amazing things. We just don't know about it. Yeah. And this kind of brought that out. It's like, wow, that's amazing what you're doing. You need to share that. Right. So we're seeing a lot of like our own learning communities come together and start sharing and working together. And we've created, one of the things we did, we had created a task force, and I was on the equity task force, and just looking at one of the items was teachers' equity amongst applications and familiarity. So we put out a survey like, what tools are you using the most? What do you need to feel you need the most help in? And then would you be interested in helping your fellow teachers in one of those? And overwhelmingly, we had teachers who said, I'm comfortable teaching others. And we're seeing great adaptation to resources that have been out there, but even working in technology, I had no idea how well we were using them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, I mean, you're by doing that sort of survey across,
Mhm.
you're able to catalog your best practices then, I guess. Huh?
Yep. And one thing I'll say from the get-go, and we've been beyond transparent as a district to our community, to our school board, to everybody. I mean, if you go on our website, the whole main page is like all our task force documentations, all our health and safety. I mean, a laundry list of everything we've done. Nothing has been hidden.
Yeah.
So everything's been front and center. We're proud of our work, and um, I feel we've done a great job in preparing. And now we're ready instructionally. I feel we're ready from an IT standpoint. Uh, it's this whole distance and the scheduling and busing, and in PA we have a tech school. So in the county we have 3 districts that we send our students to tech school. So we have to coordinate with that as well.
Yeah.
So there's so many moving pieces here, and with that goalpost continually moving, um, I feel we're getting close. I'm hopefully after my 5-hour board meeting tonight, we'll be a bit closer. So
Well, now you mentioned, you mentioned how the marking period was finished in March and it was just kind of a maintenance of the grade that was the responsibility of the student. How do you see assessment going forward, both, this year, short term, and hopefully, post COVID, in the long term, some of the assessment technologies and how they may change or the way in which we grade kids?
right. I mean, and again, my background's all in technology, so from the instructional standpoint, I'm by no means any expert, but being involved in all those conversations, I think, like I said, some of our standardized assessments that we've been using for as long as I know, uh, we've done away with a lot of those. Uh, we do use a product called Linkit. They do a lot of our analytical data on the back end, kind of data warehousing, and they have benchmark assessments. So we're actually going to create our own assessments and use those rather than pay a third party for those,
Okay.
and see how that goes, because we can then gauge what do we really want to know
Yeah.
and when we want to know it, and do that. But it's a learning curve for everybody, and I think as we move forward, we're gonna make mistakes and we're gonna learn from them. I'm gonna misquote it, but there is a quote out there: if you don't make mistakes, you're not trying hard enough, or something along those lines. And I think at this point we finally see that risk, right? Everybody's willing to take that risk right now.
Yeah.
Before they might have been a little hesitant, but we're saying, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll try it a different way. And we've always wanted to get there, and we're finally, I think, at a place where everybody's willing to say, you tried it, did it work? Yeah, but I should have done it this way. And we're going to evolve and learn from that. It's
Yeah.
a it's a cool time to be in education. I mean, it's not ideal by any means, but I think the flip side of this is going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. And one thing I haven't heard any district formally do any end of year assessments. So we don't. What did we lose from March to June? We don't know. In elementary, we shouldn't have lost much, maybe retention, but all our standards should have been hit.
Yeah.
But what did we lose, right? That constant doing helps, right? So we'll see. Then some of our courses that you can't do virtually, right? How do we address those?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Any thought given to, we were talking about the kids' creativity and the creation of stuff. Any thoughts about digital portfolios at all in
yeah.
terms of
Well,
assessment?
actually, we've been required by the state in PA to have digital portfolios. And I don't want to misquote, but I want to say there's 3 years in their secondary career where we have to report those. Uh, Artifacts have to be added every year, but we're mandated to report them. So kids have been doing that. In
Okay.
elementary, we use a system through Google Docs where we collect that, and then we migrate that up to Canvas when they hit secondary. And then when they graduate, we're able to package that up and let them take that work with them. So we'll continue that work. It'll probably get a little deeper now.
Yeah.
But I can't stress, like, our Office for Teaching and Learning is an amazing group of people, and they've been working tirelessly. And oftentimes, just like technology until now, it's just the stuff that it's just there and it works.
Yep.
And now suddenly technology is essential. Like,
Right.
suddenly, like, oh, they do they do a lot of work. It's not just when something goes down. And I think that's the same for the curriculum department. People don't realize what all goes into planning for a school year and all that back end work. So it's nice to see everybody kind of getting their time to shine a little bit.
Well, Joe, I really appreciate your time. I'm going to
Sure.
start looking for apartments in Quakertown so I could bring my kids over to your district. It seems like
There
you
you
guys are
go.
doing some great stuff there,
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate your insights.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate it, Kevin.
Okay, and thanks everybody for watching.
All
Hope you
right, take
click
care.
into another one.